All right, this is Alex Cornwell and
Megan Ryan.
with the Southwest Honey Company. Today we're going to talk a little bit about our experience installing bees into our hive in early spring on March 31st, 2015.
These would be Italian honeybees.
We're pretty much beginners at it. We've watched a lot of documentaries and read quite a bit, met some professional beekeepers, but by no means do we know exactly what we're doing.
This is learn as you go process.
So here we're just taking some of the weights off the top of the hives and kind of opening up the hives. We had them out there for about a week before we finally got the bees.
We're working on getting them into position. We faced our hives generally in the southeast direction. And so once we placed the hives, our bees came in earlier this week. Because of the cold temperatures, we're hiving our bees in a different process than what most people will show you. We are not going to spray the bees down with sugar water. It's too cold. That will cause them to freeze. So what we're doing instead is removing about 5 frames from the side of the hive that is away from the entrance. And we're going to use that space that we're creating to directly drop the wooden package of bees, the whole thing, into the hive. We're not going to dump our bees into the hive or shake them in. It's too cold. The bees are moving really slow right now. And so what Alex is doing right now is removing the top cover so that we can get the queen's cage out of the package.
Something we found out really early on was if you don't kind of drop the cage down, they come out really quickly. No matter what small hole, as long as a bee can fit through there. So they were kind of dropping it down to shake all the bees down to the bottom of the box, so we can limit the amount that come out, and then quickly covering up the hole again to make sure that none come out before they're ready to come out in the hive.
And another important thing to do is to obviously check, make sure your queen is alive inside her cage with the candy in place. We are going to remove the metal top off of the end where the candy is. There is a cork in the opposite end close to the hive tool that Alex is holding. Do not remove that cork unless you want an immediate release of the queen into the hive, which is not something that typically beginner beekeepers will do. That way it gives the colony a chance to accept the queen without getting aggressive and killing her. So we're going to remove that top cover right now and prepare to place the queen's cage down into the hive before we put the package of bees in.
And then our queen here was actually marked with a blue dot. Generally the queens are marked when they're taken out of their temporary hives where they're kind of harvested from, more or less. We're setting it in basically so the screen mesh isn't against the frames, and the worker bees can feed her and get used to her basically her scent and hopefully accept her into the hive itself.
Another important thing to remember is when you do place that queen's cage into the hive, make sure that the candy end is facing up. This will enable the bees to eat downward towards the queen. And if any of the bees inside the queen's cage die, when they fall to the bottom of the cage, they won't block her ability to exit the cage when it's time for her to.
So now we've taken out the feeder can. We've shaken the bees down a little bit, but we're pretty much ready to open up everything and put the inner cover back on as soon as we pull the spore grid off, and that's pretty much the process that we took to release the actual package into the hive. And as you can see, it's a little less intrusive. We like the method because it was almost quieter than maybe what we've seen on in terms of a later spring bee release or introduction to the hive. It seemed to be less intrusive.
And what we're doing right now is just placing an empty brood box or deep onto the top of the inner cover. and this is just going to serve as holding area for the feeder so that the bees don't have to exit the hive to get to their sugar syrup that we've made. We're going to put our feeder inside this brood box, giving them a little bit of a more sheltered and warmer access to the sugar, which also, until temperatures average about 50 degrees during the daytime and the night, you don't want to put your sugar syrup outside. It will freeze. So keeping it inside the brood box will help keep that feeder more active for the bees.
Yeah. And the sugar syrup that we use is a 2-to-1 mixture, which is 2 parts sugar to every 1 part water. We weren't really quite sure how far or how close we should go to that inner cover hole. I think most people just have a specific preference in terms of how close they want it. We assume, the closer the better. It's quicker access, and here we're kind of done with the whole process. It was really nice to not have a ton of bees swarming around. This hive was really docile, in terms of aggression, sending a bunch of bees flying into the air while you're trying to get them initially established in the hive.
And also another thing to take note of, if you notice on our hives, you will see we've put an entrance reducer at the opening, and it's on the smallest setting. This is to keep too many of the bees from exiting the hive right away before they've established themselves. So make sure if you're using an entrance reducer that you have it set to the smaller opening for the first, at least probably for the first week. We're not really sure when we're going to switch that out, but it's a good place to start with the bees.
Well, thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something. We definitely did, putting in our first bees into our first hives.